Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is George Houston, and today we are here to preview the season opening 2025 Australian Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Grid Talk's Kristin Hovarth
Hello.
and Formula One journalist Jawad Yacoub.
Hey everyone.
Thank you both for joining at not the most sociable times for either of you. I really do appreciate it. But it's Australia coming up, so I guess we got to get used to unsociable times here in the UK for this one. But before we get into this episode, we must first thank our sponsor for the episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first time, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA to college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat-trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here, and we are going to start with an Australian to speak about the Australian Grand Prix, your home race, Jawad, a race you've attended many times in the past. What are your memories of the Australian Grand Prix, and why is this a special event to kickstart the 2025 season?
Well, as far as memories are concerned, I think there's way too many to discuss in this short amount of time that we have on the show today. But just for everyone's interest, I want to highlight, I guess, the three wins here for Jenson Button, who growing up was one of my favorite drivers through the 2000s, and that famous win for Brawn that he had in '09, and then doing it back to back with McLaren in 2010 and then 2013. Kimi Raikkonen's win in the Lotus 2013, it was unexpected, but it was, we had predicted that Sebastian Vettel would just walk over the race, as such was his form at the time as a three-time world champion. But I'm going to go with a left field memory here. Maybe not the most, I guess, savory for a lot of people, but 2020 or 2025 marks 5 years since the 2020 cancellation of the Australian Grand Prix, and I've really gone back and been thinking about it. I've written a little retrospective about it as well, which I'd be happy to share later in the week, closer to the race. So aptly and ominously, it was Friday the 13th of March that the Australian Grand Prix was cancelled in 2020, and coronavirus, COVID-19, had officially made its mark on Formula One, and also for us living here in Melbourne as well. We ended up going through a record number of days in lockdown, 262 days across 2020 and 2021. But as passionate fans of motorsport, passionate fans of F1, the appetite just grew during that time. And, we're only seeing it since we came out of lockdown and F1 returned in 2022. The crowds, numbers have spoken for themselves. We've had record crowds ever since. So yeah, I guess the reason why the race is so special is because we've got such a passionate and knowledgeable fan base. Old motorsport isn't necessarily Australia's like number one sport. We've got Aussie rules football for that, and rugby league, cricket. But the fan base here is very knowledgeable, and there's a clear reason why this race is locked in contractually till 2037, which is the most, I think, of any race on the current calendar. And then you look at the history as well. So you guys will be familiar with names like Sir Jack Brabham, Alan Jones as well, world champions from here. But then some of the lesser known names too, like Tim Schenken, Larry Perkins, David Brabham, son of Sir Jack, that raced in F1 as well. So there's a lot of talent in this world, and it's great seeing we have had two Aussie drivers on the grid for the last couple of years. We've got a new one this year in Jack Doohan as well, from another famous racing family on this side of the world. So yeah, it's definitely, like, I'm maybe a bit biased in saying this, but yeah, it is quite a special race. And regardless of whether the race is entertaining or boring, because I know the Albert Park track has been criticised for being boring, particularly if you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and your side of the world, and you're not getting an absolute barnstormer that a Silverstone might produce. But I think the overall vibe and atmosphere of the race, the fact that it's the first race of the season as well as it is, this is the first time since 2020 that it has gone back to that slot. It's a real like back to school sort of atmosphere, and it's very much like a summer festival. And I'm not trying to sell it, but if you ever get the opportunity to come to a race overseas, I would solidly recommend Albert Park and the Australian Grand Prix.
Do it, man. Do it. Just promote it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I say similar stuff about Silverstone. I think it's absolutely fantastic as well. You should absolutely rep your home race whenever you get the chance. And it's likely going to be a sellout crowd again. I think 400,000 people over 3 days or something like that is expected, which is just absolutely biblical. Yeah, like you say, F1 is not the main sport of Australia, but whenever I've gone to races here in Europe, there's always been an Aussie contingent there, absolutely flying the flag for you guys. So yeah, it's a fantastic venue to attend it, absolutely no doubt. Kristin, what are your main memories of the Australian Grand Prix? Because I mean, we complain about it being a difficult time for us to watch here in the UK. For you guys, it's kind of better or kind of worse. It's a late night race for you guys on a Saturday, isn't it?
It is, yes. I was thinking the same thing about the, 2020, and I just remember people showing up trying to go to the race and then making the decision, to cancel it and everything and cancel that first part of the season. That is definitely something that, was the first thought in my mind. And then you also have some of those old school, thoughts of when Senna and Mansell, have had their run-ins with each other there. Controversial crash there once upon a time, and you had a three-way race going against. I think it was also Piquet, Mansell, and Prost back in the day. You've had some really, really great races and teams going after each other, around that track. But then for me, really a memory that happened 3 years prior to COVID is when Drive to Survive came around. And we see this character in Daniel Ricciardo, the first person that you see on Drive to Survive. And that really is when I got my love again back for motorsports. I had been away for a while. I'd been mostly an indie girl at that point too. And I was like, who is this? What is happening here? And to follow Daniel Ricciardo then, and him being Australian and just being the character that he is was a wonderful thing, So sorry that he's not there this year, but glad that, we've got Doohan and we've got Piastri. So it's great to have two of them there on the track, and I'm sure it's going to be a very, very exciting time for them.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, Piastri has, in my opinion, a real chance of becoming the first home driver to stand on the podium and hopefully keep his result in the history of the Australian Grand Prix. And Jack Doohan is, of course, as well, coming to his first Australian Grand Prix. I know he technically had his debut in Abu Dhabi, but come on, this is his proper debut. This is a proper debut for him going into his first full season in Formula One. A lot of people are doubting that will be the case, but without a doubt, he starts this season at Alpine. And Jawad, I wanted to ask about the two Aussies going into this race, because like I said, somehow, despite some fantastic drivers being on the grid and champions being on the grid, of course, at the Australian Grand Prix, in the Formula One era anyway, no Aussie F1 driver has stood on the podium officially. I know Mark Webber technically did it for Minardi back in the day as well, but that was not a top three finish for him. Do you see that duck finally being broken this year? Because McLaren are one of the teams that people are thinking these guys are going to really hit the ground running coming to 2025.
Well, Ricardo earned the podium in 2014, but only to be disqualified later. So you can't erase that memory, I guess, of seeing him on the podium after the race. But yeah, I get what you mean. Officially, we haven't had that podium. And yeah, can Piastri break the curse this weekend is the real question. I mean, McLaren, the clear favourites, I think, coming out of preseason testing, where they finished the end of last year, felt really ominous as well that they had that gap competition. But, Piastri kind of ended last year as well on a bit of a whimper in comparison to teammate Norris. So I think if you want to go for the win this coming weekend, the way Lando has been, I feel like he is going to send a statement to the competition and to the championship. But, I'm sure Aussies would happily take a Piastri podium to finally break that curse overall. But I know it's always hard, and people like Weber and Ricardo in the past have said that, the publicity and the PR engagements, all that sort of stuff in the build up to the race weekend can be quite taxing. And given that Piastri's a Melbourne local as well, he has been here for the last few weeks doing lots and lots of PR activities and engagements. Like he's got his own burger franchise, and he's doing all these other little engagements here and there, his own merchandise and what have you. So, I remember, yeah, the likes of Weber and Ricardo saying by the time they get to qualifying and then Sunday, the race day, they can be quite out of it. So, hopefully, Oscar manages himself well in this week in particular, leading up to the weekend, and we can see him really maximize that potential of the car. And for Jack Doohan, as you say, there's been a lot said in the off season and a lot talked about on Grid Talk as well, whether his bosses really give a flying hoot about, him and whatnot. For him, yeah, the test begins this weekend. He's been given that public backing by his team principal, Oliver Oakes. Less said about Flavio Briatore, the better. So I guess for Jack, he's just got to be matching or be close to Gasly in every metric he needs to be able to secure his future, whether it's, till halfway through the season or till the end of the season. But it's an unfortunate position to be in. But, I hope that he can drive without too much pressure on him as well. So he gets to enjoy the feeling of being at his home Grand Prix as well, and hopefully let the results come to him naturally. And, I'm not sure if they're a top 10 car at the moment, or they'll, rely on some of that chaos that usually happens at Albert Park to get a weird result to be able to get some points and what have you. But yeah, for him, it's just about, making sure he doesn't succumb to that pressure early on with what's going on externally.
Yeah, well, Oliver Oakes, the team principal for Alpine, has said that, Jack's done a superb job to, kind of just shut out all the pressure and all the noise that's around him. The hot rumor is that apparently he's only going to have 5 races this season. He had a contract that was signed for 6. He's already done one in Abu Dhabi, so he's going to have the first 5 of this year, and then Colapinto will take over the role. That's unconfirmed, but that is very much the heavy rumor. And when you get this much of a rumor around the F1 paddock, it's usually true. There's no smoke without fire on this sort of thing. But I just hope he equips himself well at the end of the day. Coming up against Pierre Gasly is going to be very difficult. Gasly had a fantastic end to last season, and I really do rate him highly as a driver. So I think it's going to be a very tough driver for him to go up against. But I've got a feeling Alpine will do better this year. I've got a weird feeling it's just something out of testing, just some. It looks a bit more positive. But if any team flatters to deceive recently, it's very much Alpine. So we'll see what happens in just under a week's time. Now, you did mention the freeway battle in 1986 between Mansell, Piquet, and Prost at the Australian Grand Prix for the title, Kristin. And I just want to mention that Nigel Mansell himself has backed Sir Lewis Hamilton to get a debut win for Ferrari. Something that Mansell did in 1989. He won the Brazilian Grand Prix on debut, and he actually missed his flight out of Rio because he was that concerned with the car. He thought there's no way it's going to make the end of it, and surprise, surprise, it did, and he won the race. Now, obviously, F1 are reliable these days. I don't think for a second Hamilton's going to be booking an early flight out of Melbourne. But how do you think it's going to get on this weekend? Because there is so much hype around. There's so much hype around Ferrari. It almost feels like anything other than a championship at some point would be a disappointment. But how do you think he's going to get on his debut in red?
I think he's going to excel on his debut. He's a 7-time world champion. He knows what he's doing. This is a very exciting, launch for him. It is going to be interesting watching him and Charles as teammates this year. But I think there could be nothing better for him than to have a result of a win. I mean, that would be epic, after the year he had, unfortunately, last year with Mercedes. So, we've seen him come from behind and win. We've just seen him do so much, over the years. And I think Ferrari, they look good, and they ended strong, and they almost took that championship last year. So close, so close. So testing seemed to prove well for them, and I think they're going to come out, guns a-blazing here. Why not? So um, I think there's a great possibility, but then I also think Norris wants it so bad too. So many of them want it so bad. So it's just, it goes into that. It's going to be an interesting season this year.
Absolutely, yeah. And let's not forget Max Verstappen, who probably would have won the Australian Grand Prix last year if it wasn't for that mechanical failure. So there's a lot of drivers with a lot to prove at the end of the day. It's fair to say that Hamilton did not have a good time in general last year within his last year, Mercedes, especially compared to what he was used to. However, if you're enjoying yourself listening to this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you're one of the 71% of people watching this video on YouTube who aren't yet subscribed to the Grid Talk channel, please do head over there and help us out with a like and a subscribe, and ring the bell as well for when we go live. And yes, we will be going out live shortly after the Australian Grand Prix. We'll do this for every race throughout the 2025 season, just like we have done pretty much since the start of this show, all the way back in 2019. I can't believe we're in the 7th season of Grid Talk, but here we are. So thanks for your support, everybody. Really do appreciate it. Now, Kristin did very much hint at this being a very exciting season, Jawad. I mean, we've got Red Bull, who had started last season with the fastest car, very much went downhill from there. They seem to improve. McLaren coming in as constructors champions. You've got Ferrari, who was so close to the constructors championship this year. And Mercedes, a little bit of an unknown quantity, but some people are kind of putting them up there in terms of the championship battle. So it's kind of a difficult one to answer before we even start qualifying or practice for Australia. But are we potentially heading for the best season in Formula One history in terms of the competitiveness at the front of the grid?
It's like asking, how do you make a sequel to what's already a really amazing and, classic film? And, hopefully we end up with F1's equivalent of The Empire Strikes Back or Godfather Part 2 with this season, based off the fact we had 7 different winners last year, a Constructors' Championship battle that went down to the final race in Abu Dhabi. We definitely have all the ingredients. We've got, a convergence on the technical regulations. This is the final year of the set that was introduced in 2022. We've got such a competitive field as well. I know going into last year, it was quite unique where we had a stable grid starting the last season, but then it chopped and changed many times, and we've got such a different grid this year with plenty of new faces, rookies as well. And yeah, then you talk about Mercedes are a bit of an unknown quantity at the moment. Some people think that they're the second best team after testing, or they're going to be in there with Ferrari. Like, how exciting is it that we get to see 18-year-old Kimi Antonelli make his F1 debut? Like, will we realize the hype around him is real, or will it kind of fizzle out? Same with Liam Lawson as well, making his debut for Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen. I understand, they're not right at the top of everyone's pecking order at the moment, and perhaps they've regressed further with the departure of Adrian Newey as well. I'm very excited about Williams. I think, in a prediction for Constructors' Championship order I made this week, I had them up as high as 5th, thinking that, with the trajectory that James Vowles has turned that team around. They've had Alex Albon for a few seasons now, and of course the headline signing of Carlos Sainz heading into this year. They're definitely a team that I can see punching above, in the midfield and ending up top of the midfield. So yeah, I'm really hoping we do get, Empire Strikes Back, and maybe not. I'm trying to think of a really terrible sequel to a popular film franchise. Maybe I've just done a good job of forgetting them from my memory. Let's say the Star Wars sequel trilogy, yeah, because I think they were all pretty terrible. So yeah, let's not end up with that mess and stick to like an Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I love the Star Wars analogy there. Absolutely, that's absolutely spot on. Yeah, let's hope for let's hope for a good sequel rather than a disappointing one. I mean, the first one that came to my mind was Cars and Cars 2. To be honest, I unashamedly love Cars, and it's relevant for this too. But yeah, let's hope for that because it's not very often I think we come into a season with this much optimism in terms of how competitive things are. I mean, I haven't done the maths on it myself, but I think if you cut out the first 6 or so races of last year, you end up with a really, really close championship between quite a few of them guys. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Formula One is anything but predictable when it comes to this sort of stuff. But an interesting prediction, and I'm absolutely certain that mind games are being played with this quote, but I have to give it some airtime because I think it is an interesting one. When Dr. Helmut Marko, the senior advisor to the Red Bull racing team, was basically surprisingly, Christian, I don't know if you saw, but he basically said that Lando Norris is the favourite at the moment for the championship, not Max Verstappen, which I'm sure there's more than a bit mind games being played there. But I could kind of see what he means with how good McLaren were on the whole last season and how solid they were in testing as well. So is McLaren a strong contender to get back-to-back constructors titles and maybe a first drivers championship since 2008 this year?
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah, and it could be, a little bit of a mind game that Helmut's playing there, but I bet if you asked Mark or asked Max, I think he would say Lando could win this as well. That his time, we've seen him say it before, his time is coming. And I think this is, something that definitely can happen for McLaren and back-to-back constructors. I'm a little nervous, about what their strategy is going to be this year with both of these drivers, as they are both number ones, and how long they're going to let that play again this year before they have to declare a number one. Because I think at some point you just have to give that, mentality to that driver that could be in the standing. And I think Oscar has a great potential as well as being a world champion too. He's come so fast and so far, so quickly. And but I do think I do think it could be a year for Lando if he just really believes in himself as well. If all the stars align appropriately. My concern is when you have 5 rookies though out there on the grid, and they're learning to be an F1 driver in these cars on these tracks. It gets a little nerve-wracking around there, having newer drivers out there. So you never know what can happen at the start of a race. And we had a lot of clean starts last year, and I hope that continues this year as well. So, but I do think Lando can do it.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I mean, the thing with Lando Norris, a lot of people like to clown him, take the mick when it comes to him, basically say, oh, he choked you, he made all these mistakes and that. And yeah, he did make some mistakes for sure. But at the end of the day, he was competing for the championship for the first time in his career. Even Sir Lewis made mistakes in his first season in Formula One when he was going for the championship for the first time as well. It's only natural. And I think he'll be better for that experience. But like you point out as well, the competition is strong from the other side of the garage, let alone the rest of the pit lane too. It's going to be very, very competitive. But Jawad, I would very much bet heavily that one of those teams that is not going to be in that mix is Aston Martin. Now, we all thought that they were going to struggle this season. It's the last season of the current regulations. Adrian Newey's not really going to have an effect on that car yet. Enrico Cardelli, he's not even going to be able to join the team until the summer now, has been determined as Ferrari have won a court case against Aston Martin. Both of their drivers were ill during the preseason testing. They did the fewest laps of preseason testing. And even when they did get out there, Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso, they didn't look great. The car does not look great. Now, Alonso said at the end of last season that they had the 9th fastest car on the grid. They were down there with the Saubers. And honestly, even with the magic of Fernando Alonso, I think they're going to really struggle to score points this season. But what's your take on Aston Martin coming into this year?
Well, I agree with you actually, and as I was doing my constructors rankings earlier in the week, it was very much a case of I feel like I've use the example of Williams before, but Alpine, even Racing Bulls, Haas, they've all leapfrogged Aston Martin. And I think for them, I'm not saying that you can just write off a season. I mean, I know Gunter Steiner did it back in the day for Haas, but I don't think a team like Aston Martin would really want to write off a season ahead of, the big rules change coming next year. But I guess from what we've heard, they've understood, or they understand where they went wrong, and that's to the benefit of having someone like Andy Cowell on board, who's come in from Mercedes. He was the engine chief for many, many years during their successful stint from the start of the hybrid era, and he hasn't lacked ruthlessness in the feedback he's given and has made changes since he became the CEO and team principal. He went to Mike Crack, who was in his job early, and said, well, I'm going to take your job now, and yeah, you report to me. So he's basically come in, made those changes. He's also said publicly that the pressure is on the team to actually be able to give the drivers the machinery in the car to be able to be competitive as well. And I have no, I don't object to that, because you look at their resources. This isn't Force India anymore, Racing Point, where they were a hand-to-mouth team making the most of a small amount of resources. Ever since they made the transformation to Aston Martin and the injection that Lawrence Stroll and his capital has given the team, they are technically a big team when you look at the new factory and everything that they've got. So they've got a golden opportunity here. And while, yeah, like you said, that, Newey's not going to have an impact this year, if they don't come out of the blocks firing next year with the likes of Newey, and if they get their hands on Enrico Cardile eventually, the talk about them even courting Max Verstappen away from Red Bull to Honda power units coming on, then you really have to ask serious questions about the management of the team and whether, Lawrence Stroll is just being delusional with his idea to make them a world championship winning force. But considering that, in 2023, we came into the first few races and Martin was the second best car to Red Bull, the dominant Red Bull, the fact that they've regressed to now, ninth is just absolutely bewildering. So, I'm glad that they've identified what they've got to do, but they've got to make some progress this season. I mean, we saw Alpine last year, and Alpine is an omni-shambles of a team. As we know, Alpine go from back of the grid to being able to get on the podium in Brazil and also finish sixth in the constructors. So, and who had that on their bingo card at the start of last year? So hopefully Aston can make some progress too before the end of the year. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you that they've definitely had a big fall from grace.
Yeah, I've said it for a while now. They, like you said, they used to be Racing Point, Force India, Jordan. If you go back there far enough, and they used to, no matter who the owner of what that team was at the Silverstone base, they always made a really decent car out of relatively small resources. Ever since Lawrence Stroll's come in with all his billions of dollars, they have somehow made a pretty damn average car with some of the best. They have arguably now the best facilities in Formula One with their new base. And it just seems to be going backwards. I mean, I'm not writing them off for future success. In theory, that team really should do really well next year. But this year, it is anything but that. It is not looking good at all. But we'll see. They could surprise us. But I remember very well as a McLaren fan in 2018. Alonso did a very good job in the Australian Grand Prix at the start of the season, and he was like, "Now we can fight." And that was his best result of the season. It just went backwards from there. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Aston Martin. But it is not looking particularly rosy right now at Silverstone. But yeah, those are the main topics we kind of wanted to go through going into the Australian Grand Prix. And for the first time in 2025, we spoke about some predictions, some things that could happen. But now it is time to put our money where our mouths are. Kristin, I want to hear your predictions. Pole position taker, the podium first through third, and also a bold prediction for the first time in 25.
Okay, pole position. I'm going to say Charles. I think he's going to come out. He's really good at that one lap, and getting pole. So I will say that. Okay, what's the next one I need?
The podium first through third.
Okay. Okay. I think who's actually going to win it? Let's go. I'm going to go Lando, Hamilton, Piastri.
Okay. And the bold prediction?
The bold prediction is Yuki Tsunoda is gonna finish in fifth.
Top five for Sonoda on Racing Bulls' official debut because they've changed the name again. I did a video earlier on and I called them Toro Rosso, so I'm just stuck in the past. Looking forward slightly to the future. Jawad, what are your predictions? Pole prediction, podium, and also the bold prediction.
I was going to say, you mean Minardi? Okay, pole position, let's say Lando Norris. He was imperious at the end of last year, and I feel like he's going to pick up where he left off with that. And contrary to what I said earlier, when I said Lando would win the race, I'm actually going to go McLaren 1-2, but with Piastri ahead of Norris. So we break that curse and we have an Australian win the Australian Grand Prix. And just to send the crowd into more rapture, Lewis Hamilton podium on debut for Ferrari, that would be as good as a win. I know Albert Park hasn't been the happiest hunting ground for Lewis. He's got the record for pole positions at the track, 8 pole positions, yet only 2 wins from that. That is absolutely absurd for someone of Hamilton's, stature and capability as well, that he hasn't had more luck around there. So, yeah, I think having him on the podium there on Sunday is going to be as good as watching Carlos Sainz win that race last year. And for my bold prediction, I'm going to say both Antonelli and Lawson will beat their teammates on Sunday in the first race.
I like that, man. I like that. Bit of classic Aussie bias there. Unbelievable stuff. Now, do it, man. Do it. Go for it. Well, I'm gonna counter that with some British bias in a sense. I really want to say Hamilton's debut win. I really want to do, but just something tells me that Ferrari are a little bit off. There just seemed to be a bit of despondency around them in the third day of testing. I don't know what it was. I don't know. Maybe it's them bluffing. I don't know. Maybe the poker face has worked on me, but I'm gonna go with Oscar Piastri to get pole. And I'm going to go with Lando to get the win. I'm going to go for a McLaren 1-2, but in the reverse of what you said, Jawad. And the podium, the third place. I don't think you can fully ignore Max Verstappen, so I'm going to go with him on the podium. I'm going to go with a third place for Verstappen. And you've inspired me a bit, Jawad. I'm going to go with Williams for double points.
Oh.
Sainz and Albon, because they were close to getting points I think they would have got points last year if Albon drove his car during the race. Obviously, he had to drive Logan Sargent, and I feel like they have improved quite a bit. So, and very good drivers as well. So I'm going to go with Sainz and Albon on in the top 10 at some point. So yeah, those are our predictions. Jawad, I mentioned that you are a Formula One journalist and you're also attending the race this weekend as well, but where can people find your works?
Yeah, so theraw.com.au is the website that I primarily write for and do live blogs of all the Grand Prix. So like I said earlier, I'm writing a retrospective piece about the 2020 race. I was there, experienced what happened firsthand with the cancellation. So just a retelling of that account. And for the one that I'm writing for the Raw, I was lucky enough to interview a British F1 journalist the other day over Zoom and get his perspective. So I'm excited to share that with everyone there. And I'm also writing a more personal account for F1 Chronicle as well to go out the same time. So yeah, lots of memories coming back to me about that particular event. And Chase Carey, all the big wigs were there, and all the fans, like Kristin was saying, stuck outside the gates, not knowing what was going on for hours, and yet you've got this potentially contagious disease a threat. So yeah, check them out on the Raw, and also dabbling in F1 Chronicle here and there too.
Yeah, that was such a weird race. I mean, we previewed that race here on Grid Talk, but the race never happened. So bizarre, previewing a race that never happened. Kristin, is there anything you want to promote?
No, not at this time. I am going to be getting back and writing again for F1 Chronicles again this season. So now that this season is up and coming, so you can write articles there.
Thank you very much. And if you want to see some more from me, I too am an F1 Chronicle contributor, but mainly on the video side, where I was hoping for us to hit 10K subscribers on YouTube before the season starts. I don't think we'll quite get there, but we're on 9,000 odd, so I'm very happy about that. If you want to get my reaction to any kind of news or anything that's happening in the world of Formula One, you can find it on there. YouTube, Also on Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. I think we're on Instagram too. I've discovered as well that we are the largest Substack Formula One newsletter in the world. I don't even know how we've done that, but I'm going to rep it every single time I get the chance. I absolutely love the content that's being produced on there. And Patreon as well. We've got a Patreon now, so if you want to donate to us, that'd be very much appreciated. But on the Grid Talk side of things, we're available on YouTube, where reviews are recorded live, just like the one for this weekend will be. This is a preview, though. This will just go out after that, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for F1 Grid Talk for our big back catalogue. I have no idea how many episodes we've done now. I think it's over 400. It's a lot anyway, going all the way back to midway through 2019. But yeah, thank you to Jared, Bradley, and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. And if you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content just beyond the Grid Talk as well? We're recording a new one of those, which is an exclusive Patreon members only podcast that goes out once a month. And also Grill the Grid Talk is currently sizzling at the moment. All the panelists were absolutely cooked during that show. It was honestly, it was so much fun. But if you want to take part and laugh at our kind of expense, I do implore you go out there. The first 3 of the rounds are out now, and 4 and 5 is on the way as well. So yeah, hope we have a fantastic start to the Formula One season. I don't really mind who wins as long as it's an entertaining race down under in Australia. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.